Okay, so in this short video we're going to discuss and go through the contribution made by the Belgian anatomist Andreas Vesalius and how much of a contribution he made to anatomical knowledge during the 16th century. Through the course of this tutorial we're looking to try and understand how the work of Andreas Vesalius improved anatomical knowledge, and the hope is that in the lesson that follows we will go some way to evaluating the importance of his work in improving our knowledge of how the body works. So just to clarify our terminology, anatomy is the bodily structure of an animal or any of its parts, and the science of the shape and structure of organisms. This was something that Vesalius was particularly keen on and interested in as a young medical student who came from a long line of doctors. Both parents and grandparents were actually doctors before him. So the fundamental concept of Vesalius's work was the understanding that visual or pictorial instructions were more easy to follow than written word. All medical books prior to Andreas Vesalius were essentially words and written instructions in various languages. Vesalius believed that through really accurate anatomical drawings, the accuracy of his instruction, the accuracy of medical books could improve, and therefore doctors that were looking to learn about how to perform certain procedures and understand how the body works would be able to follow them more easily. I'm going to play you a short video that just introduces a little bit of the story of Andreas Vesalius. It's one that you will revisit during the lesson to follow, but it goes some way to explain his journey up to a certain point.
The first person to create really accurate drawings of the human body was the Renaissance genius Leonardo da Vinci. But he never published. So, well into the 16th century, doctors still relied for their understanding of anatomy on crude drawings done 1300 years before. It would take a Flemish dwarf called Andreas Vesalius to change that. Picture the scene. It's 1536. A criminal has been hung and left to rot on the gibbet. One evening, along comes Vesalius. He's a 22-year-old medical student. He looks up at the corpse with longing. Body snatching is illegal, but that does not deter him. Vesalius jumps up, grabs the bottom of the legs and pulls. With a terrible ripping sound, they come off in his hands. He runs away into the night, clutching them in his arms. What Vesalius was doing was extraordinarily dangerous. Not only was he risking jail and personal ruin, he was challenging long-established ideas. At Vesalius' medical school, there was just one set of anatomical textbooks, written by Claudius Galen. Not only had they been written 1300 years before, but they were also largely based on animals, like pigs and apes. At human dissections, Galen's words would be read out, while unquestioning students looked on from a distance. Aged just 22, Vesalius decided to do something that would have outraged and disgusted his contemporaries: dissect and examine a human body himself. Undeterred by the rotting human flesh on his kitchen table, Vesalius now began to strip the corpse down to its bare bones. He treats it rather like making beef stock. First of all, he gets a big pan of water and he sets it to boil. Then he gets the bits of his corpse and removes as much skin and flesh as he can, and he drops those bits into the pan. He boils away for hours until the whole thing falls apart. You wonder what the neighbours must have thought.
Vesalius' own choice to be like this represents a quite extraordinary excitement in the pleasure of dead. And he's drawn to it, and he insists on living with it and surrounding himself with it in a way that is actually, I think, quite spooky.
Now, Vesalius had set himself one hell of a task. There are 206 bones in the human body, and when I was a medical student, I could name pretty well each and every one of them. These days, I think I'd struggle. Bone by bone, he painstakingly tried to identify every single part of the human skeleton and put the jigsaw back together again. This is clearly a femur, but what this is, I couldn't begin to tell you. For Vesalius, though, this was just the start. He now wanted to map every organ, every ligament, every muscle in the human body. He was determined to understand how the whole thing fitted together. To do this, he needed more bodies. So naturally, he stole them. In fact, he stole them from the same place that all these bodies came from, the cemeteries of Paris. I'm here in Oxford to see what Vesalius risked so much to get his hands on.
So that goes some way to introduce what was certainly a bit quite a creepy but still impressive figure in Andreas Vesalius, who was obsessed with the accuracy of his work. So we'll go through a little bit of going through his story and his journey, and then think about how his work actually came to fruition in a series of texts. So his life started in Brussels, where he was born, and as I've already said, came from a medical family. At the age of 15, he enrolled at a university in Louvain to study art, interestingly enough. And as the presenters just said, he then moved to Paris, where he started to do his work on human dissection. Following that, in 1537, he moved to Padua in northern Italy, where he became a teacher of surgery and anatomy, and he would do public dissections of corpses in front of students who would make notes and illustrations of the procedures he performed. So shortly after leaving for Padua in northern Italy, he's appointed professor of surgery and was responsible for teaching anatomy to its students. He also produced some of his own original sketches of various body parts, but this earlier work came to fruition when he published his first text, Tabulae Sex, where he had a series of anatomical drawings. The first you can see here, or one of the more famous ones. So this is a sketch, a very accurate sketch of the body's nervous system, but it includes the famous 5-lobed liver. Now at this point, Vesalius's anatomical knowledge goes beyond that of his hero, Galen, the Roman physician. Now remember, Galen was limited and was not allowed to perform human dissection, and as a result made a number of errors in his anatomical sketches and writings, because obviously this 5-lobed liver actually came from a pig, not a human. So Vesalius at this early stage in his career is not confident enough to question the theories of Galen. So in his first images he copies the 5-lobed liver, when actually he knew from his dissections of human bodies that actually there were only 2 lobes in the human liver, as you can see from the images on the slide here. Vesalius' second piece of work is a letter that he wrote on venesection. Now remember, venesection was this practice of bleeding a patient, of extracting blood from a healthy patient in order to restore balance of the humours or the liquids. Again, this is a Hippocratic or a Galen theory from ancient medicine that was still being used 1500 years later during this Renaissance period. So doctors at the time believed that you should bleed a small amount of blood from the patient on the opposite side of an infection, whereas Vesalius, true to Galen's teachings and the teachings of ancient medicine, believed that you should take large amounts of blood on the same side of the infection. We obviously now know that both theories were not medically proven, and we know that because this is a practice that we do not use today. So both sides were wrong, but you can see here from this work that Vesalius was keen on looking back at old ancient medicine beliefs and theories and restoring them in the Renaissance period. This culminates after years of work and study. The most important piece of work that Vesalius produced was the fabric of the human body. This was a series of 6 large anatomical drawings, incredibly detailed, and like the one that you can see on the slide. You can also see on the slide that he's taken his annotation to the next step. So you have various muscles, ligaments and body parts labelled, and then alongside a definition of what he has labelled. So you see this perfect integration between written instruction or explanation and these fantastically accurate sketches. He actually recruited a very famous artist by the name of Titian, a very famous Renaissance artist, to actually produce these drawings for him. But Vesalius was so committed to this project that he actually oversaw the making of every block print, the carving of every wooden print block, in actually producing these sheets and these sketches. So he was very hands-on, very committed, and at this point, several years later, beyond tabulae sex, he is now confident enough to contradict Galen's teachings, and so these anatomical sketches were as accurate as any that would be produced today. He is confident enough now to go against the teachings of Galen and the ancient medical thinkers. So your project or the thinking that I want you to do prior to the lesson is about coming up with questions regarding the work of Andreas Vesalius. Here is our question chart. I want you to try and think of as deep a question as you possibly can, and try and think about some questions that you come in and pose to the rest of the group in our next lesson, in which we're really going to try and evaluate how important was the work of Andreas Vesalius, and how far did he improve anatomical knowledge. So hope you enjoyed that. Have a Google search for Andreas Vesalius, see if you can find anything else about him. He is an intriguing character, and I look forward to taking part in the tasks in the lesson.